Hello, I'm Tim Shoebridge for Cherry Audio. Let's go back to the 80s, the 1980s, with the Cherry Audio Ensoniq ESQ-1. The 1980s, possibly the greatest decade for electronic pop music, quite possibly, because it was in the 1980s that analog synthesizers were becoming more and more affordable and therefore more and more attainable by normal people like you and me. Also, digital technology was becoming more and more capable, not just in terms of digital control. We had MIDI, we had the ability to save presets, but also in other ways as well. Now, the Ensoniq ESQ-1 was a true hybrid synth. At its heart was an analog filter, the same filter that you can find on a sequential Prophet VS. But in terms of the digital aspects, it had 3 digital oscillators per voice, and each of those oscillators had a choice of 32 digital waveforms to be able to play. So it had a vast palette of sounds at your fingertips with an Ensoniq ESQ-1. In terms of digital control, it was immense. There were 4 multi-stage envelope generators, 3 LFOs, a mod matrix, and the whole synth was fully multi-timbral, 8 voices of multi-timbrality, and it had an 8-track sequencer on board to be able to control them. It was a monster of a synth. Now, Cherry Audio have got full license to replicate the original Ensoniq ESQ-1 byte for byte in terms of those wonderful digital waveforms. So we have an incredible recreation, including a fantastic emulation of that analog filter. So without any further ado, and I love that expression, let's take a look at the front panel. So here is Cherry Audio's ESQ-1. It looks amazing, it looks fantastic. Now, like all Cherry Audio instruments that are keyboard based, we have a virtual keyboard view. So we have a top panel with controls, and then we have the bottom section of the instrument where we have the keyboard. Now, as you will be aware if you've ever played any of Cherry Audio's other products, that this bottom section has got different views to it. So with these little buttons down the bottom here, we can control whether we're looking at the keyboard or whether we're looking at the effects section, for example, or we're looking at something else. Now, I'm not going to cover the effects. These are the same effects, these are the same wonderful effects that you get in other Cherry Audio instruments. We have these wonderful multi-effect buses here. Just take it for granted that they're here. They are absolutely fantastic, and obviously they give an extra dimension to the sounds of ESQ-1. So we've got keyboard view, we've got effects view, and then we've got something here called motion view, which is a fully fledged arpeggio section and a multi-track sequencer. I will come back to these and talk about them a little bit later on in the video, but that is the third view on this bottom half of the instrument. We'll just switch back to keyboard view for the time being. Now, in terms of this top section where the controls are, there are multiple views to it as well, and those are controlled by these buttons here on the right hand side. We are currently looking at play view, but we have edit view like that, we have modulations view, and we have envelopes view. We'll come back to those, we'll do them one at a time in sequence. We'll start off with play view, and play view really is a fantastic overview of the patch that you're playing. It shows you sort of, all of the really important controls, and it allows you sort of real-time performance aspects, kind of control of those different parameters. So you'll see here that we've got these 3 digital oscillators right bang in the middle there. We've got this wonderful graphic showing the waveform that's playing. We've got octave control, we've got a level control either side of that display, and above it we can see the waveform's name. This is where we would choose it, and we've got access to some modulation options here. We'll get onto those in a minute, but this is where we can modulate the output from our waveforms, and we can see instantly whether or not our oscillators have got modulations in force by looking at the top here. Now you'll see quite quickly that oscillator 1, the level is fully up and it's on, whereas the other 2 oscillators are off and the levels are right down. So we're actually only listening to oscillator number 1 at the moment. And I'm so impressed with the sound of these oscillators. They really sound beefy and deep. They really have got a lot of weight to them. They sound great. So that is our oscillator section there in the middle. We've got access to the main 2 controls that we need to have access to in terms of the filter. We've got the frequency cutoff and the resonance. And then in terms of the last envelope, the envelope generator that is attached to the final VCA of each voice, we've got access to the attack and the release of those for quick changes on the fly while we're playing. Over on the left, this section is the mod matrix. Now it's interesting that we have the mod matrix on this front panel, this kind of overview, and that's because the mod matrix is such an integral and important part of the ESQ-1. The name of these modulations, they call them macros, and once we've set up our modulations, we've got real-time control of them here on the front panel. We can intensify them or whatever we want to do with these sliders here, so we've got real-time control of them. We don't have any modulation set up for this very simple patch that I've got going on here. We've just got one single waveform, and it's this sawtooth. Let's take a look at the other waveforms that we've got available to us. So here are the 32 different waveforms here. Some represent virtual analog waveforms like sawtooth, square waves, etc. Some are far more digital, sort of like digitally generated waveforms, and others are taken from real-life instruments and real-life sounds, sort of multi-sampled if you like. They are single cycle waveforms, they're not true samples. But we have got 32. Now, in actual fact, we don't have 32 waveforms. I would rather call these waveform collections, and I'll give you an example why. If we choose piano, for example, you'll see that we have this far more harmonically rich and complex waveform here for a piano. Now when I play the keyboard, it's not going to sound exactly like a piano because we really need to create a patch and sculpt the envelopes and stuff like that to make it sound like a piano. But we've got a raw sound of a piano in terms of this waveform. But look what happens when I play down the keyboard. different ranges on the keyboard will play different waveforms. So it is quite similar to a multi-sampled sample playback here. They have got different samples depending on the frequency, and I guess that's to create as much realism as possible with some of these waveforms and maybe reduce artifacts, aliasing, etc. But that's what we have. It's a good example with the piano. I don't know if it's like it with all of the waveforms, but I've noticed it with quite a lot. The waveform here does change. So we've heard sawtooth, we've got piano. Let's pick out some other classics here. Bell. What else can we listen to? We've got pulse here. It's not what you would think. It's not a pulse square wave. It's something far more complex. Classic square wave. Beautiful hollow sounding square wave. Really, it sounds like a clarinet, doesn't it? It's lovely. I do have a little bit of effects on, by the way, just a little bit of reverb and a little bit of delay, as you can see down the bottom. I just like to listen to sounds with a little bit of ambience to them. Let's pick out a few more. I'm not going to go through them all. I'm a real sucker for voice samples and voice waveforms. I love to create sort of Vox style pads and choirs and stuff like that. There are a couple of voices here. What else have we got? We've got organ. This is a wonderful sound. I mean, some of these samples really do remind me of a Korg DW8000. That instrument, similar kind of concept, a hybrid, digital waveforms and analog circuitry. But the ESQ-1 just goes way beyond it in terms of its capabilities. It's a lovely waveform, that one. Really lovely. We've got some synths here. Quite sort of clangorous. We've got some formants. So you can create vocal sounds out of those as well. What else have we got? We've got a different square. Electric pianos. There was another electric piano that I missed further up. It's a little bit brighter. And some lovely ambient waveforms as well. So those are our 32 waveforms, sets of waveforms, a fantastic collection here, all beautifully reproduced in Cherry Audio's ESQ-1, byte for byte, literally reproduced from the originals. And of course we've got 3 digital oscillators. But what if we want to change more than just a waveform and its level and octave range? Well, that's where we get into the next set of controls, the next sort of screen, if you like, that we can see in this upper panel, the edit screen. So the edit screen is where we get a full view of the analog signal path all the way from the oscillators through to the final amplifier stage. I think I called it a VCA earlier, I do apologize. It's a DCA because the modulations are all digitally controlled in the ESQ-1, which makes them so powerful. You'll see here at the end we have envelope generator number 4. It's dedicated to that output amplifier at the end of the signal chain, and you'll see that it's a multi-stage envelope generator, like all of them are. I'll show you the others in a second, but it's best to understand the envelope generator by looking at this diagram. There are basically 3 levels that you can set. Level number 3, L3, is the sustain level. But there are actually 2 levels before that. There's an attack level and a decay level. So you can come up with some really quite complex, very, very flexible sound shaping using these envelopes. So we have these 3 levels, and then we have the times taken to reach those levels. So we have T1, T2, T3 and T4. It starts off at 0, it ends at 0, but we have 3 levels and these times. And you can see that we've got all these sliders here. These are the level sliders here, and we've got these legends here, A, D and S, so we know easily which levels we're changing. And we have the times, and again we've got A, D and R against them to help you to actually set them how you want them to be. It is very flexible, but you can just use it as an ADSR if you like. And we've got this fantastic graphic here. So if I just play a note, you'll see that we can see in real time. This is sustain here, being held at sustain. You can see in real time how your note is progressing through the envelope, which is really, really helpful. It really is. Not only that, but we can actually use this graphic here to change our envelope. I can click on it and drag it and move it around like this. So it's so wonderfully flexible, really, really fantastic. So we have a view here of the analog signal path all the way from the oscillators down. We have a view on one oscillator at a time, and we can select which oscillator we want to look at with these buttons here. So we're looking at oscillator number 1 at the moment, and we have all this set of controls here. So we have the octave range, the number of semitones, so we can get exact tuning that we want, and there's a fine tune control for each of the oscillators. We've got our waveform and our lovely graphic like we saw before, and here we have 2 modulations available to us. If I play a note, you can hear that there's a little bit of vibrato going on, and that is being provided by a modulation LFO number 1. So we've got a very slight positive modulation of LFO number 1. All of these modulations, they go positive and negative, but that's what's giving us our vibrato. So it's modulating the pitch of oscillator number 1. We have a second mod slot to modulate pitch if we want to. It's currently not being used. And then, like I said at the beginning of the video, each oscillator has its own dedicated digitally controlled amplifier, and that allows us to further sculpt the sound. We've got an overall level control as to how loud the oscillator is. We actually have an on-off switch as well for it, but we have another 2 mod slots which allow us to shape the sound in terms of amplitude. And in terms of these modulation slots that we have all the way along here, we have a very big comprehensive list of modulation sources that we can use. So from oscillator and its dedicated amplifier section, we move into the filter. The filter here, at the moment we're listening to the low pass filter. In fact, there's no filter frequency cut off set at all. Now, the way that the low pass filter was implemented in the original ESQ-1, it wasn't able to self-resonate, and we have exactly the same behavior here with Cherry Audio's replica. But But what we also have, as well as that low pass filter, is we have a 12 dB version of it, and we have a high pass and a band pass as well. Now, just like with the amplifier section and the oscillators, we have two mod slots, so we have got two possibilities here for modulating frequency cutoff. Again, the same comprehensive list of mod sources and two sliders to control. After that, we move to the final amplifier section, digitally controlled amplifier number 4. We've seen the dedicated envelope generator over here, but we also have another mod slot available to us, so we could choose any of these. We can choose any of the other envelopes as well. We've got LFOs, we've got all of those different mod sources here, and we can also modulate the panning of this particular voice. We can set the pan manually, and then we can modulate the pan based on this modulation source here. Now, before we move off the screen and look at the next one, I just want to quickly talk about this envelope generator again. There's something about it that I just want to mention. It's so cool. Yes, it's a multi-stage envelope generator. It is really very flexible, but it's also got this velocity sensitivity, but it's actually got two velocity sensitivity sliders, which I really find amazing. This first velocity sensitivity slider is affecting the levels. So the harder you hit the note, the greater the velocity, then the more extreme the levels will be. So, you know, how loud or quiet is controlled by this particular slider here, and that's quite normal, right? But we also have a second slider, a velocity sensitivity for time, specifically for time. So we can actually speed up the envelope by hitting the keys harder or softer. Let me see if I can demonstrate that to you. So the velocity time sensitivity is linked to the attack phase. At the moment we've got a very short attack phase. In fact, it doesn't even register, it's so fast. So let's really make it very slow. Like that. Okay, now I'm going to turn up this velocity sensitivity. Let's turn it up right up to maximum. At maximum, if I hit a key hard, it skips the attack phase completely. Or it's so fast that it's visually skipping it. But if I press the key slowly and really slowly, so that's an extreme example with this up to maximum, but with subtle amounts of it, you can really get a wonderful, realistic feel as you're playing, not only in terms of amplitude, but also in terms of time with all of these envelopes. Onto the modulation screen next. This is where we see that mod matrix that is also on the play screen, and we have 3 LFOs. They're identical LFOs, they're digital, they are feature rich. In terms of the little buttons, to the left of each one we have a choice of waveform: triangle wave, sawtooth, square and noise. These buttons over on the left allow us to sync to MIDI clock, reset the phase on each note press, and we have a human option which is going to add a little bit of drift, a little bit of human quality, which is really nice addition. And now in terms of these sliders, well, the first slider is the frequency, the rate of the LFO, but the other three sliders are sort of described in the little graphic display here. We can fade in our LFO and we can fade it out. We have got two different levels, an initial level, L1, a final level, which is L2, and then we have a delay slider which specifies how slow or fast it is going from L1 to L2. So if you listen to the sound that I've got going on here, there's a vibrato from LFO number 1, you can see it flashing away there. And as I bring this down, that delay gets longer. Bring it down even further. So the initial level is 0, and then the final level is at maximum, and the delay is controlling how slowly or how fast it goes from L1 to L2. So we've got a gradual onset of vibrato. But I could do it the other way around. Let's say it starts off with max vibrato at a high level and then goes down to nothing. Let's make it shorter. It's a little bit odd to me that the delay is longest when the slider is at the bottom, but that's how it is. However, if we make the delay 0, with the delay at 0, we never get to L2, we just have L1. I guess it takes an infinite amount of time to get to L2 when it's right at the bottom. So right at the bottom we just have L1, right at the top we have L2, and then we've got everywhere in between. Very, very cool. This none, this is to specify a controller to to set the amount of modulation, these levels. At the moment it's none, so we're just dealing with these values here, but I could let's say set it to mod wheel. So even when it's gone through its little delay and it's down to 0, I can still create modulation with the wheel if I want. And we have a whole load of different modulation sources to affect the level of our LFOs. Now let's just talk about the mod matrix, these macros. We have a mod matrix with 4 slots in. They're called macros 1, 2, 3 and 4. And as you can see by the little legends here on the right hand side, it's very, very simple. We have a destination, a source. The slider is giving us the amount, which can be positive or negative, and we can go via. So we could, for example, set up a modulation and then maybe have aftertouch as a controller for it, or mod wheel, or whatever we want to do. So in terms of the different destinations, there are loads and loads and loads of them. As you can see here, we can target all the oscillators at the same time or individually. And in terms of what we target, we can modulate the waveform choice. So we can actually set up real kind of like wavetable kind of sounds by changing which waveform is playing at any point in time. We can also modulate the pitch, the fine tuning for really quite, fine adjustment of pitch. And we can also modulate the amount of the modulations that may be set up for the oscillators. It's really very, very detailed. LFOs, we can modulate the LFO rates, so we could have an LFO modulating the rate of another LFO. We can modulate, again, the modulations that we've set up for our digitally controlled amplifiers, as well as the level. Frequency, we can modulate resonance as well, and the modulation amounts. It's really very, very detailed in terms of what we can modulate here. We can modulate the envelopes, the different time portions, attack, decay, sustain, release, etc. It's incredibly powerful, incredibly deep, and we can get on and actually modulate the arpeggiator and the sequencer, which we haven't talked about yet. And Cherry Audio have added the ability to modulate effects as well. Very, very cool. Right, so in terms of this upper section of ESQ-1, there is one more screen to look at. It's the envelopes screen. Here it is. We have these 3 freely assignable envelopes, exactly the same as the one we've already looked at, envelope generator number 4. We have got multi-stage envelope, the 3 levels, the 4 time controls, plus the cool, really cool velocity sensitivity. So here are our 3 envelopes, and we have the wonderful graphics. We can drag these around and set them how we like. Very, very nice. Over on the left, we've got a little sustain pedal button. Do the envelope generators respond to the sustain pedal or not? Now, initially, this got me a bit foxed. I think, well, why would you have this? I mean, if you don't want them to respond to the sustain pedal, then just don't put your foot on the pedal. But then I remembered that the original ESQ-1 was a fully multi-timbral instrument, so you could have some voices responding to sustain pedals, whereas others wouldn't, and get some really creative options that way. Now, talking of multi-timbrality, this is Cherry Audio's ESQ-1 is a plug-in instrument. It's a virtual analog plug-in instrument. So in terms of multi-timbrality, you can just run up as many copies of it as you want, right? As many as your DAW and your computer can support. So from that point of view, they don't need to add multi-timbrality into ESQ-1 at all. However, there are plenty of people that like to run it standalone. I do that a lot actually with Cherry Audio instruments. I love just running them up on their own with no DAW and just playing them. And so for those people, we have got layers. We've got bi-timbrality. All of the signal chain that I've been mentioning so far, they are all a instance of ESQ-1 and a layer in ESQ-1, and we can have 2 of them if we want to. And when we do have 2 of them, we can layer them on top of each other for some very complex sounds, or we can split them across the keyboard. And as you can see here, they're color-coded red and green. This is very, very familiar to you if you've got other Cherry Audio instruments. That red and green encoding relates to the effects buses. So each layer has got its own effects bus. Very, very powerful. Right, so we've covered all of the screens for the upper section. In terms of the lower section, this is the keyboard, as we know. I've mentioned before the effects section and the different layers, the different FX buses, so I'm not going to go into that. It's just the same as it would be on a previous Cherry Audio instrument. Very, very powerful and very, very cool. Let's look at the screen that we haven't covered yet. which is this motion section. You can get at it here by clicking on the motion button at the bottom, or we could do the same thing by clicking on the sequencer button on the top here. But it's not just a sequencer, we have an arpeggiator as well. It's a standard arpeggiator that you would find on other Cherry Audio instruments. It's very, very powerful. I'm not going to go into it, but you'll see we've got leap and we've got order, we've got random, we've got all the stuff that you are used to seeing in Cherry Audio arpeggiators these days. We've got not just swing, but we've got chance and we've got feel as well. It's standard on their instruments. Over on the right hand side, this whole section over here is the sequencer. Now obviously the original ESQ-1 came with a very powerful sequencer. Here we have a 16-step sequencer. So we have up to 16 steps on a pattern, but we can record up to 4 patterns, so A, B, C and D. You can switch between them manually by clicking on the buttons, or you can set how many times they're going to repeat. So you can build up some quite complex sequences that way. Now in terms of what you can sequence notes as you'd expect, and to do that I'm going to just do a live record here and click on live record. It starts off at position number 1. I just keep pressing notes until I want to stop. Let's do 8 steps. So those are recorded in. Then I can click on steps here and say it's an 8-step sequence, and I'm done basically. At that point you'll see that they're lit up, as opposed to these ones which don't have any note data recorded against them. Very, very simple to record note data into the sequencer. But the sequencer is not just about note data, it's also about modulations as well. It can be used as a modulation sequencer. You'll see here we have M1, 2, 3 and 4. Now these represent the modulations or the macros. If I go back to the play screen at the top here, these 4 macros are going to be modulatable by the sequencer. Basically these levels here are going to be modulated by the sequencer. So I can drag these levels up and down to set the modulation amounts that I want for macro number 1, and then I can switch to macro number 2, do the same thing, 3 and 4, etc. Right, so in terms of the sequencer itself, it can be modulating these macros at the same time as triggering notes, or you can just have it triggering notes, or you can just have it as a modulation sequencer playing over the top of whatever you're playing. Very, very powerful. And in terms of what you sequence, we can be sequencing layer number 1 or layer number 2 or both of them together. that is all I have time for. I've run out of time. In fact, I don't know how long this video is yet until I edit it and put it all together, but I'm pretty sure that I've gone past my 30-minute threshold. There's so much to cover. It's such a deep instrument. There are so many things that I've missed out. I do apologize. There's going to be so many useful things that I haven't yet mentioned. The SysEx compatibility with original ESQ-1 patches, I haven't mentioned that. I'm going to get told off once I've submitted this to Cherry Audio. They're going to say you didn't mention this and you didn't mention that. There's just too much. There's too much to mention. Please check out the user guide. Absolutely check it out. It's full of useful information. It's written in a really approachable manner. Check out other people's videos, no doubt, of this synth. My personal view on it is it's a masterpiece. It's a work of art. The user interface all the way through into the programming of it. I don't know how many man days and months and years it's taken to bring it to fruition, but I'm sure it's a colossal effort on Cherry Audio's part. I honestly think that this is a future classic instrument for years to come. Check it out. Now, you know, if you're really into programming your own patches, then this is a sound designer's dream. It really, really is. But if you're just into playing sounds, there are hundreds of fantastic presets that come with it, and I'm sure so many people out there will be developing and releasing their own presets for this instrument. It's got such potential. So, you know, whether you are someone that just wants to play presets or someone that wants to get right into the weeds and enjoy yourself with programming, it's for everybody. It really, really is. I'm waffling now. I've had so much fun with ESQ-1, I really have. Until the next video, as always, thank you very, very much for watching.